Hello and good evening. You're watching AWANI Tonight with me, Hafiz Marzukhi. Malaysia is postponing the expansion of its sales and services tax to provide temporary relief for manufacturers who are bracing for higher US tariffs. The planned expansion of the tax base, originally due on May 1st, will now be implemented at a later date.
Manufacturers have previously urged the government not to add to their tax burdens after the US imposed a 24% tariff on Malaysian goods. Along with other Southeast Asian nations, Malaysia is seeking to negotiate a deal with Washington within the 90-day pause of higher tariffs mandated by President Donald Trump. In the meantime, Washington has imposed a 10% levy on goods from Malaysia and other trading partners. A spokesperson for the Finance Ministry said engagements with industries to finalize the scope and applicable tax rates for the planned expansion have been completed. They added that the guidelines are now being refined to ensure smooth implementation once the measures are introduced. Gazettement of the new tax changes is now scheduled for June 1st.
The US has agreed to commence formal negotiations with Malaysia on the 24% tariff rate set to be imposed on the Malaysian imports, says Tengku Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz. The Investment, Trade and Industry Minister says talks will focus on reducing the tariff rate, addressing non-tariff barriers and trade imbalance between the two nations.
Zafrul said MITI has appointed its Deputy Secretary General for Trade, Mastura Ahmad Mustafa, as Malaysia's chief negotiator for the upcoming negotiations with the US. While the US has also named one of its Assistant United States Trade Representatives, or USTR, to lead the talks, with negotiations expected to commence soon after the signing of a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA, and the cabinet approval is secured. Zafrul said the talks aim to gradually reduce tariffs, not to zero, but to levels that benefit both sides, while also addressing non-tariff barriers and ways to ease them, particularly in agriculture. As for the trade imbalance, he noted that it has already been halved over the past 4 years, from over $40 billion to $25 billion, with the US pushing for further reductions. Following recent meetings with US officials in Washington, Zafrul said discussions went smoothly. He also clarified that Malaysia did not request an extension after the end of the 90-day pause in negotiations.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals retains power in the country's election. However, they fell short of the majority government he had wanted to help him negotiate tariffs with US President Donald Trump. The Liberals were leading or elected in 167 electoral districts, known as seats, followed by the Conservatives with 145, with votes still being counted. The Liberals had needed to win 172 seats of the House of Commons, 343 seats for a majority that would allow them to govern without support from a smaller party.
Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
But you're going to take us forward.
We have to look out for ourselves. When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations. And it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options than the United States to build prosperity for all Canadians.
The result kept a notable comeback for the Liberals, who had been 20 percentage points behind the polls in January before Carney's predecessor Justin Trudeau announced he was quitting and Trump started threatening tariffs and annexation. The Liberals are the last party to win 4 consecutive elections in Canada, accomplishing the feat in 2004. In response to Carney's election win, China has signalled a willingness to improve relations with Canada. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun said Beijing was open to developing ties based on mutual respect, equality and mutual benefit. While China stopped short of formally congratulating Carney, it emphasized that its stance on Canada remains consistent and clear. Relations between the two countries have been strained in recent years, following a series of disputes, including allegations of Chinese interference in Canada's 2019 and 2021 elections, which Beijing has denied.
We'll go for a short break. Stay with us.
Dah cuba elak panas terik, tapi kulit kepala masih gatal dan berminyak. Mungkin ia kelemomo. Gunalah Head & Shoulders. Berkesan menghapuskan kelemomo sehingga 100% bebas kelemomo. Head & Shoulders.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Donald Trump will take action to reduce the impact of his tariffs on US car makers, according to a White House official. The US president is set to announce measures to reduce some import duties on foreign parts that are used in vehicles manufactured in America.
Although cars produced abroad would still be subject to automotive tariffs, they would not be hit with further levies, including those imposed on steel and aluminium products. The Wall Street Journal also reported that reimbursements would be given for such tariffs that were already paid. Trump is expected to announce his official plans later on Tuesday. The move to soften the effects of auto levies is the latest by his administration to show some flexibility on tariffs, which have sown turmoil in financial markets and created uncertainty for businesses. Trump had said earlier he planned to impose tariffs of 25% on auto parts no later than May 3rd. A coalition of US auto industry groups urged the president last week not to go ahead with his plan on imported auto parts, warning they would cut vehicle sales and raise prices.
As President Donald Trump approaches the 100-day mark of his second term, public sentiment remains largely negative. Polls show Trump has the lowest approval ratings for a president at this stage in 80 years, with a majority of Americans dissatisfied with the current state of the economy and fear a looming recession.
A Fox News poll found that voters oppose Trump's policies across most issues except border security. The New York Times reports a 53% disapproval rating, while a Washington Post ABC News poll shows 55% disapprove of his policies, with only 39% in support. In response, Trump has lashed out at posters on his Truth Social account early Monday morning, calling them negative criminals and demanding they be investigated for election fraud. Earlier this month, the president sparked a stock market decline by announcing sweeping tariffs on nearly all US trading partners, a move economists warned could drive up consumer prices, contradicting his campaign promises. Meanwhile, the administration faces a wave of lawsuit and backlash over executive orders, particularly those targeting mass deportations and widespread federal job cuts, while Trump presses ahead with his immigration crackdown.
US President Donald Trump will mark his first 100 days in office with a rally in Michigan, his first since returning to the White House in January. He is scheduled to visit Macomb County later on Tuesday, a region just north of Detroit and near the Canadian border.
Trump's campaign has described his upcoming speech as a celebration of the most successful first 100 days of any administration in history, citing actions he has taken to ramp up deportations, curb inflation, and reduce federal spending. Michigan was one of the key battleground states Trump flipped from the Democrats in last year's November 5th election. The state is home to the so-called Detroit 3 carmakers Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. It also houses a network of more than 1,000 major suppliers to the automotive industry, which Trump has promised to support through tariffs on foreign-made imports.
The U.S. Trade Representative, or USTR, has placed Mexico on its priority watch list for intellectual property or IP rights. The office cited persistent concerns over enforcement against trademark counterfeiting, copyright piracy, and inadequate protection of pharmaceutical-related IP and plant varieties.
USTR's annual report, based on analysis of over 100 trading partners, now lists 8 countries including Mexico, China, Chile, Argentina, India, Indonesia, Russia, and Venezuela on the priority watch list for IP deficiencies and 18 others on the watch list. These findings could impact US tariff and trade negotiations, especially under the Trump administration. In March, the US imposed 25% tariffs on Mexico over its failure to halt fentanyl exports, mostly originating from China. Trade compliant with the USMCA is exempt, though duties on energy and potash remain at 10%. US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said trading partners must address the concerns identified in the Special 301 report and stop those stealing the intellectual property of hardworking businesses and individuals.
China state broadcaster CCTV reports that Guangzhou Port, the largest shipping hub in southern China, has opened a direct shipping route to Chancay Port in Peru. This move will reduce logistics costs and bolster trade with Latin America.
Chancay, located north of Lima, has begun non-stop operations with Asia, accommodating South America's largest Pacific vessels. The direct route reaches Peru in about 30 days and reduces logistics costs by around 20%. The new route will accelerate the connection between Guangzhou Nansha Port and Latin American ports such as Mexico's Port of Manzanillo and Chile's Port of San Antonio. The announcement comes as Beijing seeks to deepen ties with resource-rich Latin America amid ongoing trade tensions with the United States. Chancay Port's first phase, a $1.4 billion project led by China's COSCO, was inaugurated in November during the APEC summit in Lima by Peruvian President Dina Boluarte and Chinese President Xi Jinping. China is expected to invest billions more as it works with Lima to position Chancay as a major shipping hub between Asia and South America.
China will not dump its goods in other countries despite its trade and tariff tensions with the US. Beijing's ambassador to India, Su Fei-hong, writes this as he addresses concerns about potential influx of cheap Chinese products flooding other markets.
The trade war between China and US has raised concerns that Chinese firms may divert goods to other markets, hitting competitiveness of exports from other countries. Since US President Donald Trump took office, China and the US have imposed tariffs over 100% on each other's goods, rattling global markets. Last week, India, the world's second-largest producer of crude steel, imposed a 12% safeguard duty on some steel imports to curb a surge of cheap shipments, primarily from China. This influx of Chinese steel has forced some Indian mills to reduce operations and consider job cuts. India is among several countries taking steps to protect local industries. After a 2020 border clash sourced relations, India restricted Chinese investments. However, both nations are working to rebuild ties, with Chinese President Xi Jinping urging closer cooperation with Indian President Draupadi Murmu this month as they exchange congratulatory messages celebrating the 75th anniversary of their diplomatic relations.
Now that report wraps up AWANI Tonight. Check out our web portal, keeping you informed on the critical events shaping our world, all in one place at international.astroawani.com. That's all for now. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Thanks for watching and good night.